Hey, hello, welcome to another Dark and Darker video. It's me, Cranberry. How's it going? Hopefully you're doing well. We're getting pretty close to the end of this playtest. At the time of recording, I did just find out that the playtest was extended by a few days, which is pretty cool, but we're getting pretty close to it, so I feel pretty confident in making a little tier list here. I want to do three things in this video. I want to talk about character viability in as a solo player, specifically in the Goblin Caves, because that's where you're supposed to play solo right now. I don't want to really get into the weeds about viability in the main dungeon, because that's kind of a mess, basically. None of the characters, I mean, in my opinion at least, none of the characters feel very strong there, because you're usually outmanned. You could make some arguments for certain characters being better than others, but it just feels like, you know, pointless. But in the Goblin Caves, because that's where you're supposed to play solo, it feels more important to talk about it there. So we'll talk about character viability in the Goblin Caves, character viability in a three-man team in the normal dungeon, and then we'll just talk about some changes I'd like to see for the characters, I guess. Nothing super crazy, but just some cool stuff, I think. And yeah, that's it. That's the video. That's what we'll be doing. So I have the characters here listed in the amount that I've played them so far on this playtest. Barbarian is my most played class, followed by, well, Rogue. I don't know why the thing here, you know, my tier maker's not perfect, I guess. Whoever made this list put it as Thief. It's a Rogue, but, you know, semantics, right? Then we have Fighter, Ranger, Wizard, and Cleric. This is the order in which I've played the characters, or like time-wise. So take that into account when I'm making this list here, right? Starting off with the Barbarian here in the Goblin Caves. For me, this is a pretty easy S tier. I feel like the Barbarian has a lot of great tools in the cave, combined with a pretty high HP total. Means you're going to be, you know, if you get into a fight, you're going to be probably winning that fight. Listen, you know, a lot of characters can outrun the Barbarian, but I've done a lot of research about this, and I've looked at people's opinions, and the consensus seems to be that if you try to run away from a Barbarian in the Goblin Caves, you're probably going to get gummed up by the AIs in there instead. Goblins are, you know, not surprisingly, all over the place, and it's very hard to disengage from a fight in a lot of the rooms in the Goblin Caves. Not all of them. Some of them are not impossible to disengage, but not easy. So if you're a Barbarian, people will either fight you and die or run away and die. It's kind of how it goes there. So it's a pretty good thing you got going. And then also you gotta take into account a couple of the utility skills that Barbarian has in the Goblin Caves. I think it's Savage Roar is the name of it. I should have looked it up before making the video, now I'm realizing. But the Savage Roar skill that scares enemies and lowers their physical damage for, I want to say, 6 seconds. Incredibly strong in the Goblin Caves. There's only a few enemies that aren't affected by the roar. So if you see, you know, goblins, goblin mages, the bugs, skeletons, everything, except for, I think the skeleton champion is unaffected, I'm pretty sure. But, you know, he doesn't matter, really. There's only, like, 2 in total on the map. And it's pretty easy to steer clear of them. So, Savage Roar being able to remove aggro from you and letting you basically just kill any, you know, AIs you see in pretty much 2 headshots most of the time is an extremely useful tool to have as a Barbarian. Combined with just, like, you know, I think I've come to really love the smash passive for Barbarians. Being able to break down doors in the cave is also really nice, especially if you're running away from AI. Let's say you're a Savage Roar. You use your Savage Roar, you get aggro off you for a couple seconds, you just run up to a door, smash it, run through, move on to the next room. It's just useful. Like, the Barbarian has a lot going for it here. Love the character, very strong, very good. I did make a video recently, not trying to self-plug too much here. I made a video about making money in the Goblin Caves, and I choose to play the Barbarian because I feel like it has the highest survival rate in the Goblin Caves. However, some people would play a character like the Ranger or the Rogue instead because of their high resourcefulness stat. Also, important to note, Thief, or God, now I'm reading it. Rogue and Fighter actually have the same resourcefulness stat. They both have a 15. So neither of these characters are necessarily better than the other for mining here. But anyway, Important to note that Barbarian, if you want to go mining, not a very good character for it in that sense. Very low resourcefulness stat. Takes them a while to actually get the ore, but not the worst in the game, and obviously, and pretty strong in general. Moving on next to the Rogue here, specifically again for Goblin Caves. I gotta put Rogue probably. I don't think any character is actually an F tier character for this. None of them are unusable. I feel like to quantify it here, F tier is a character that I would never bring to the Goblin Caves no matter what ever. Like, it's just not fun to do it. And Rogue isn't quite there, but Rogue is just not very good. Rogues do a couple things pretty well in the game in general. They're very good at killing Rangers. And if you get the drop on them, they're pretty good at killing wizards and sometimes clerics, depending on how well geared the cleric is. Honestly, most clerics, if they have some armor, will beat a rogue in a 1v1 fight still. But they're very good at killing unsuspecting wizards, and even if they are suspecting, they're pretty good at chasing down and killing rangers as well. But in my experience, most people aren't bringing in rangers and wizards to the Goblin Caves. So you see them sometimes, rangers more often, I would say. You see them sometimes, but not like a tremendous amount. And it's tough, man. You're a thief, you get hit once by a goblin, you lose half your HP, you have no inherent healing, there's nothing really to pick, like there's no locks to pick really, there's maybe a couple locked chests every once in a while, but like most of the chests are just open. Like there's just not really a reason to play thief on the Goblin Caves, really. I will say, as with every, solo endeavor, the thief is sneaky. They're able to stealth. They're able to become invisible and maneuver short distances around the map, which is very useful for disengaging both an AI and players. But unlike the Barbarian, who has the ability to basically stun lock AIs for 6 seconds, the Rogue can't do that. As soon as your stealth ends, immediately get aggro again, right? Assuming you're near them. You can stealth and walk away, I think, and lose aggro that way. But I'm saying, like, you don't get the easy free kills on AIs that Barbarian gives you. So it's tough. And then also, I see Barbarians all the time in the Goblin Cave. And same as Fighters, too. Like, Fighters and Barbarians are probably the two most common classes you'll see in the caves. And they just tear apart rogues in a 1v1. I'm sorry. But unless you get a crazy good sneak attack on a Barbarian and they're just clueless. Like they don't know where they're getting hit from. They're like engaged with another AI or another player and they don't know what's happening. It's so hard to kill them. It's so tough. It is a rough one. So I put rogues in the C tier here. Again, not unplayable, but pretty stinky. Fighter's a pretty easy A tier. They kind of just they have range capabilities that the Barbarian doesn't, but they lose a lot of that utility that Barbarians get with the yell, the ability to smash doors down. And in the Goblin Caves, I don't feel like you really need a ranged weapon necessarily. It's not terrible to have. You can there's a lot of times you'll see goblins clumped up together and you can use the bow to draw them in one at a time, which is pretty cool. Instead of aggroing them all at once. But it's just not necessary. And when it comes to PvP, you don't get many long distance engagements. There's a couple rooms in the caves where you can, a couple of long corridors every once in a while, but players can just usually opt to not fight you in those corridors and find you somewhere else in the caves later instead. It's just range is not necessary. It's nice to have, but it's not a requirement in the Goblin Caves. And that's really kind of it. Fighters, I mean, I don't know. They're not terrible. They're fine. They do stuff. Fighters are how would I put this exactly? One thing I want to talk about actually here is important to note is the cave troll. We didn't talk about the cave troll at all because I've seen videos of people killing the cave trolls as a barbarian, but it just doesn't seem worthwhile doing it as a barbarian because blocking is pretty important. And I haven't tried it myself, so I can't say for certain. The quarterstaff is a barbarian weapon that can block. I'm not sure if the quarterstaff can block the cave troll attacks. My guess is no. That feels wrong, right? That you can take a stick and block the cave troll, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure about it exactly, so I don't know. But what I will say is that the barbarian lacks range damage, which is really important for killing the cave troll. And both the fighter and the ranger have the capabilities of blocking attacks and doing range attacks. So I think they're, in that sense, they're better. If this was a cave troll killing tier list, You know, we'd be somewhere around here right now, but we're not that. Important to note, though, that the fighter is probably the best character right now for killing the cave troll. You get easy access to shields, and you also can just use either a crossbow or, weapon mastery with a long-range weapon, right? Pretty good in general. We're going to go Ranger next here. Ranger, I'm going to... Oh, you're supposed to be here, by the way. Ranger, I'm going to put in the B tier. It's just a worse fighter in the Goblin Caves, really. But that's not a bad thing, right? You trade your... if you're using Second Wind, you trade Second Wind for the field rations, right? Which are not bad. It's a good ability to have to be able to eat the food. And then triple shot's always going to be strong no matter what you're doing. But with so many, again, fighters and barbarians running around in the caves, the ranger just loses a lot of 1v1s if you're PvPing. One of the strengths that ranger has is in the main dungeon is their ability to just kind of harass and pester, especially backliners. Other support characters are very good at just, whittling and taking them down, which is really important. But in the caves, not so much. Not as important. When you're just, when you're in a 1v1 deathmatch against a barbarian running at you, and if you run away, you run into a pile of goblins, and you have no skills that remove that aggro in any way whatsoever, things become a little tricky, right? So it is important to note, though, that again, like the same strengths that the fighter has, the ranger does have, in that they can draw in single AIs to engage in 1v1 combat rather than potentially risking multiple aggros. They do have the ability to use arming swords, which are not a terrible melee weapon as well. And the rapiers too, but I like the arming sword more between the two of them. But they have some similarities there, but they have access to, I don't want to say worse armor, because armor is subjective, right? Move speed versus physical damage reduction is a whole thing, but they have worse dueling capabilities with other players. Basically, is the issue. And again, the Goblin Caves, a lot of tight spaces. You have some long corridors, but again, people usually aren't funneled down your corridors. They can usually bypass that corridor, go a different way. It's just not great. It's just not a great character, but not bad. That's why they're B tier. And I also want to mention again, cave troll killing. Now, at the beginning of the playtest, Ranger was probably hands down the easiest character to kill the cave troll with. I done a video of me killing the cave troll. Post regen buff too. I did a video killing the cave troll as a ranger. Post regen buff on the cave troll, and it was tricky, but it was doable. Since then, they've actually changed the AI so that sweeping attack the troll does is much more random. It used to be that if you were a long distance away, the sweep attack would always be a overhead sweep and you could duck under it. And then if the troll was close to you, the sweep attack would be a low swing and you could jump over it. That's not the case anymore. But rangers have access to a shield, the Pavis, which I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, actually. But the Pavis, the shield that you can plant on the ground, right? You can just use that as a normal shield as well. And rangers can just shoot a couple arrows, switch to the Pavis, block and attack, right? More or less functioning the same way as a fighter would function in that situation. But they kind of just end up being, in my opinion, worse, because you have to buy a Pavis. Think of it this way, right? Pavises are pretty much never sold by the merchants. You'll have to go into a trade channel and buy one. It'll probably be really expensive, because last I looked, people know that the Pavises are expensive because you need them as a ranger to kill the troll. So they're usually like 500 gold each. You're risking 500 gold to maybe kill the cave troll. And if you die to any other... Anyway, the point being is that it's possible with the ranger, but it's definitely less viable than just killing them as the fighter with your default shield. But yeah, there is that. Up next is Wizard. I don't know about Wizard. Here's the thing. It's a good time to point it out now. It's more relevant in... It's more relevant in 3v3s, I suppose. But there's been a lot of changes to the Wizard this patch. Let me pull up my Discord here, because I have the Dark and Darker Discord page open here. A lot of changes happen in hotfix number 3 to the Wizard, and this Fireball one here that I have highlighted is probably the most important change out of all of them. Right? This is a huge deal. There's been a lot of just tiny nerfs to the Wizard here, right? Like a lot of spell counts being reduced from like 5 to 4, whatever, yada yada, right? but the splash damage on Fireball being cut in half is a really big deal. Now, Fireball, it's not easy to hit someone with it. You oftentimes just end up in a 1v1 fight taking fireballs and just throwing them at someone's feet and then just kind of like chipping them away. Because they do good damage. They did previously 20 damage plus whatever your damage modifiers were onto the fireball, right? And then also burn damage, right? So a fireball splash could do 40 to 50 damage if you had like good equipment on a wizard. It was strong, and losing 10 damage, albeit it's not going to be like half your literal damage because all those modifiers still get added, you know, accordingly. But going from 20 base to 10 base on splash is a huge deal for wizards when it comes to PvP combat. For AIs, not that big of a deal because the impacts are still going to be pretty important. And obviously, if you get a direct impact fireball, it's still really strong. But the splash damage nerf is actually a pretty big deal. I would have preferred a direct damage nerf instead, because you're always getting the splash damage hit. I could be wrong about this actually, because I haven't tested it, but I'm pretty sure direct impact fireball does also do the splash damage on top of it. I could be wrong about that. I could be wrong. I admit I could be wrong about this. I haven't tested it myself, but they feel like they do both damage when you get hit by them. It's a lot. It's big numbers is what I'm trying to say here. So yeah, wizards, big nerfs. They did get buffed. I should point it out here too. They did get a little bit of a buff back in that. Where is it here? To say it here. Wait, where's the? Was it in the same patch? Where's the thing about? Am I crazy? There's a thing about the meditation giving you a lot more spells back, right? Here. Oh, here it is. I'm dumb. So yeah, in hotfix number 4, meditation now gives you way more spells back, and it takes less time to charge. So that's a good thing for sure. That's very good. All of that being said, and again, this is being recorded after that patch. That was the last hotfix patch to the playtest. Things can still change since then, right? So keep that in mind here. For Goblin Cave specifically, I don't like wizards that much. I think I'm gonna put it down here with Rogue, because I just feel like that fireball nerf is a pretty big deal. And all this, and one thing to mention, wizards have the invisibility spell, which is pretty cool because it lets them in the same way that a barbarian would get out of combat, the wizard can, but they can, and thief can too, but the wizards can do it a lot longer in a less sustainable burst. But now with the meditation buffs, they can also just kind of get all their invisibility casts back really quickly and then keep doing that throughout the dungeon. So I don't know. This one's the most I'm the most dubious about, because I don't think that I don't think it's bad. I don't think they're bad, but I just don't know why you'd play a wizard in the Goblin Caves. You're very frail, you're very brittle. Same issue the thief has, where if you get hit once, you lose like half your health at least, basically. And with the fireball nerfs, you can still like magic missile down an enemy, but it's not the most reliable way in my experience to kill someone. If I'm a barbarian, right, and you're a wizard, and you try to point blank magic missile me, I'm going to take my felling axe, I'm going to hit you in the head once, you're going to be dead. I'm going to lose like half my health probably doing it, but like that's you know, an acceptable loss there basically. So I don't know. I don't know what you're doing with the wizard in the Goblin Caves. It doesn't seem very useful to me, but I don't know. Maybe you got some crazy shit going on. Invisibility is a very strong spell in the Goblin Caves for losing AI aggro, and there's player aggro too, I suppose, right? And you can just keep spam casting it, so you know you're effectively stealthier than a rogue is. But it's not that important to be that stealthy, I feel like. So I don't know. Up next here is the cleric. Also kind of stinky. Now, it was never like a super strong element of the cleric to be anti-undead. Like there was never, at least I don't think people were going around saying, oh, cleric is so strong because it's got strong anti-undead options in the normal dungeon. But it's a nice thing to have. It's nice to be able to kill AIs with your cool turn undead skill, and it doesn't use a spell slot. That's pretty neat, but I don't know how good it is. And it's useless in the Goblin Caves, basically. There are some skeletons, but not many of them. So the cleric just seems like it's, you know, not very good. Cleric's strength comes in being a supporting character, and for that it is good. It obviously has a lot of self-sustain as well, with its ability to heal himself. But I'm gonna put, Cleric. This is maybe the closest we'll get to F. I think I put it in C tier as well for the Goblin Caves. It's just like you're better off playing a fighter, like 99 out of 100 times. There's just not much of a reason to play a Cleric instead of a fighter. You get healing, you get sustain, but like it's not. Fighter also gets some sustain, and your spells are just mainly meant to be support spells, and you're just gonna be better off playing a fighter, I'm pretty sure. And yeah, so that's it. That's it for the solo tier list. Now we're gonna move on to 3v3 here, and I want to arrange them in the order of most to least played for me. There we go. Okay, we're all good. We're all good. So, there's been a lot of debate. I've been seeing people talking about barbarians being the strongest character, and I agree with them being the strongest character for the Goblin Caves. I think that's pretty hands down clear. But there is some pushback to barbarians being the best character in 3v3s, and I think they're definitely up there. I think people are kind of trying to downplay the barbarian strength because they don't want any nerfs happening. But I think they're strong. I think they're very strong. And I've seen people say, like, oh, it's not barbarians that are strong, it's the felling axe that's strong. The way this game works is that what characters are evaluated based on the weapons they can use. So that is the barbarian being strong. That is not a correct point if you're saying that, like, obviously then nerf the, like, yes, a nerf to the felling axe is a nerf to barbarian. What, like, the nerfs to longbows were a nerf to ranger, right? That is a thing. And then by extension, fighter as well, if they want to use longbows, because you see that all the time. But anyway, that being said, I would put barbarian in the A tier here. And I think this is going to be a more balanced tier list, because I think the game is better balanced in 3v3s than it is in solo gameplay. So we're going to probably not have anyone in S or F tier, I think, here. I put barbarian in the A tier, though. I think their HP pool is massive. They don't need armor. They just go in with like a huge, as a huge slab of meat. They go with a felling axe, or even other weapons too. I've used plenty of the barbarian weapons. I've seen people talk about quarterstaff being good. I'm not convinced that quarterstaff is like amazing, but it's not bad. Quarterstaff is definitely pretty cool. It makes you better at chasing down, other backliners, but in my opinion, barbarian is not for that. Barbarian is for killing their other barbarian and or fighter. That's the barbarian's job, and they do it pretty well. What do I say exactly? I haven't really. I don't want to retread information here, but I've seen people talk about some sort of like basically combo move here of wizards and clerics, where wizard will cast haste on barbarian, cleric will cast like the protection bubble, and the barbarian just goes to town. It's like a thing, I guess, but I don't see it being very common. And it's a lot of investment on your barbarian just to potentially have your barbarian killed by an enemy's frontliner, with the wizard and cleric not being able to do too much else. The cleric can obviously heal, but the wizard is going to be not that great besides that, in my opinion right now. I'm not a big 3v3 wizard fan. I just don't know. You're going to always be at risk of hitting your barbarian with spells with this strategy. So your only thing you can really do is like ignite and then haste your barbarian and maybe make them invisible. But if you make them invisible, I don't know. It just doesn't seem that worthwhile. But it's interesting as a supporting role. But anyway, we're talking about the barbarian here. It's good. It's good. Barbarian is very strong. Has good abilities. Rage is good. Hits very hard. But there are vulnerabilities that you can exploit. I don't really agree. I've seen a lot of, again, I've done a little bit of research about this. I've seen a lot of people say that like the barbarian is not good if you just like outplay them and exploit their weaknesses. The barbarian does have a weakness of being pretty slow. That is true. But in my experience, people don't like running away. If you see people, you will fight them. And people don't like running away from a fight. So the whole advice of just like kite the barbarian is true, but just in practice, like people just don't do it. They want to fight your team. They don't want to run away from your team. They don't want to. They don't want to, and especially depending on like the situation, they might not have that option, right? And it is hard for any character to kill a barbarian, but like rangers can whittle them down so your other front line can kill them. It is pretty good. Anyway, I'm sorry, I bumped my mic there and actually accidentally unplugged it. Sorry about that. I'll have to edit out the gap there. You might hear a skip in the music. Anyway, sorry, what was I saying? Barbarians? Good. A tier. A tier character for sure. Up next is Thief. I'm gonna put him in C tier again. I've seen a lot of people say Rogue is the worst. Oh, I called him Thief again. God damn it. Whoever made this, I got a bone to pick with who is it? Miguelis Gatto. I got a bone to pick with you. That's not what their name is. Mauglis? Gatto? I got a bone to pick with you about this damn Thief, because you're messing up my brain. Anyway, Thief is a C tier. Probably, I do agree with most people that Thief is probably the worst character in the game for 3v3s. They do have the ability of chasing down and killing rangers and wizards pretty well. They're not bad at that, but they're not amazing at it. It's not like you get a Thief on a ranger. It's not a guarantee that you'll kill them, especially if the ranger is aware enough to pull out their melee weapon and fight you. They usually lose the 1v1, but it's not a guarantee that they lose it. So I don't know. I have suspicions that the Thief is the worst character in the game, but I think people do kind of over exaggerate their weaknesses. And they also, if you care about it, lockpicking is a useful utility. It just means your group gets a little bit of extra money. But from my experiences playing the game, you're not like relying on those locked chests in order to like, oh man, we really needed that extra money from those locked chests. It's just a nice little perk. It's not a necessity though, by any means. So Thief goes in the C tier, probably gonna be the worst character here. Fighter. Maybe a controversial one. I'm gonna put Fighter in the B tier only because they just do a bad job against barbarians right now. Fighter, they still have that dexterity of being able to both be a melee combatant and a ranged combatant. The weapon mastery buff was a pretty nice buff. Getting the damage reduction from 20% to 10% is a pretty big deal. But I don't know, you just use a crossbow instead. Like, you don't need to worry about that too much. And even then, the crossbow fighter is pretty good, but like, I don't know. I just feel like the fighter's role is now just kind of obsoleted by the barbarian existing. It just feels to me like the fighter's job was to support your team with range damage, and then when you got into melee combat, be a tank and protect your backline. And it feels like the barbarian is just too good at breaking down that front line now, and you're just better off playing a barbarian to protect your team instead. So I don't know. Fighter just seems like it's just obsoleted here, but it can't be denied that the fighter has utility that the barbarian doesn't have. Ranged weapons being one, armor being another. And yeah, that's about it really. Not bad though. Solid B tier. Maybe going to be a controversial pick here for me, but I put Ranger in the A tier alongside Barbarian. Rangers got a lot of nerfs in playtest 4 here. There's a lot to not like about Rangers right now. The arrow damage fall off was a bit more exaggerated, I think, than the devs have let on. I've just in the waiting room in lobbies, I've tested it. It's significant. You lose like 10 damage per shot at what I would consider like a medium range hit, which is not nothing. Like it's a big deal to have your damage drop significantly. At what I would consider to be still pretty close quarters combat. So there is that to keep in mind. And then there was the secret longbow nerf, which was a pretty huge deal for Rangers. It wasn't a secret nerf, but like it was a pretty big change in the amount of damage output Rangers could do. All of this being said, Rangers are still pretty important to have because fights get broken down into who dies first. Once a 3v3 becomes a 3v2, that 3v2 usually becomes a 3v1 and then a 3v0. Sometimes you do just, trade, right? It happens. But it's a big deal to get the first kill in a fight. And Rangers really help you do that. I've had plenty of times where, again, it's a barbarian v barbarian. We're getting into that melee fight. The barbarian's getting buffed by a cleric, but because we have a ranger in our team, my good ranger friend will triple shot the barbarian, land all 3 hits because he's goaded, and then I just come in and I one tap the barbarian through all of the buffs and all of the support that the cleric gives him, right? And that is extremely good, and it's hard to do that with any other class in the game. Wizards can kind of do it, but you risk hitting your own teammates with those abilities. You obviously risk hitting your teammates as well with rangers, but if you're good, you don't have to worry about that. Just hit your shots, right? Click heads, etc. So, that ability that rangers have to soften up targets for your front line to actually kill them is, in my opinion, still a really important part of the game, and it's huge. And that, especially that burst damage, the burst damage of the triple shot is still always going to be strong, no matter what. And it's really good, and that's why I put him in A tier still. I think they're still a very good character. I think they're getting underplayed right now because of all of their nerfs, but I think they're still really important for your team. Up next, we have the Wizard. I don't feel very confident about this. I mentioned before that wizards are really good with the cleric wizard buffs on the barbarian, right? I haven't played with that comp at all, so it's hard for me to evaluate, and I feel like I just don't run into that very often, so it's really hard for me to assess this. But I think it's probably fair to put the wizard somewhere in B tier for the reasons I mentioned before. The fireball nerf is a huge deal for wizards. It's a big oof. However, one thing to keep in mind, it's a lot easier to hit a group of 3 people with a fireball with a direct hit as opposed to just a single person by themselves. It's very easy just to throw a fireball into just a blob of enemies and hoping that one of them hits. And then also the fireball nerfs are kind of secretly in a blessing a bit of a buff, because if your barbarian is fighting the enemy barbarian and you get a direct hit on that barbarian, and you only put splash damage on your teammate, that 10 flat damage reduction is going to be pretty important for not killing your own teammate. So there's some things to talk about here with the wizard. The haste stuff is pretty important too, but again, I haven't played with it, so it's hard for me to evaluate. But they're good. They're strong. I like them. But the nerfs are a pretty big deal. Meditation is important to note that you can be a lot more liberal with your spell usage with meditation. You're already pretty liberal with it, but you're a lot more liberal with your spell usage now with wizard, which is important to note. I shouldn't have put cleric in the F tier because now it's going to be here forever. Finally, the cleric, in my opinion, and maybe this is the most controversial thing I'll say here, I think cleric goes in the S tier for 3-man comps. I think the cleric is, bar none, the most important character to have on your team when you're playing in the main dungeon with a full squad. They're just so good. It's hard to it's hard to understate how important it is to heal someone in the middle of a fight. Because if my barbarian is fighting your barbarian, right, and they both trade hits, which happens very often, if I heal my barbarian and you don't, my barbarian there's a good chance will survive one more hit, whereas yours will not. And the same goes for anything. The same goes for a fighter, right? My fighter survives an extra hit, your fighter doesn't survive. We now win the fight, right? I can't stress enough how much fights come down to just getting the first kill and then steamrolling the rest of their team. It happens all the time. It's upsetting when it does happen to you, but that's probably how you're losing your fights as well, is that one person died and now everything goes to shit, right? And clerics are really good at making sure that does not happen. Not to mention, the utility of killing undead is nice if you're opting for that. There's a lot of good things to like about the cleric, basically. And they're not unlike the wizard. They're not like, I shouldn't say the wizard's incompetent in melee combat either, because point blank magic missiles do just melt people. But the wizard usually ends up trading in that exchange more often than not. But the cleric is capable of, handling its own in combat. Will often get one shot by barbarians if you get a headshot, but they have access to shields, so they can usually block high, crouch, whatever, stuff like that, and block a lot of incoming attacks. They do decent damage. Mace, the flanged mace is not a terrible weapon moveset. And it's just incredibly useful utility in the middle of a fight. The 20 health shield is really important. The stat boost is not terrible either. If they put Divine Strike on you, go absolutely nuts. Like they just have a lot going for them. And yeah, that's my tier list here. Now, breaking all of that down, what do I want to see changed about the game? Let's talk about Barbarian first. Not a lot. I like Barbarian where they're at right now. I think they're pretty good the way they are. I would like... You know what I would prefer, I think? There is currently a skill in the game where Barbarians who don't wear shirts get a physical attack damage increase. I would prefer that to be a move speed increase. I think that would be a cooler design. Maybe too strong. There maybe needs to be some nerfs as well to combat that. But that would be a cooler design idea if you ask me. Like an unarmored fighter, like Barbarian who just, hulks out and just runs really fast is cooler to me personally. Besides that, not much to say about the Barbarian. I like where they are pretty much design-wise in general. I will say that Axe Specialist is a really interesting perk in that it adds a flat damage bonus, which I think is the only perk in the game that does that. I would like other characters that have perks similar to that. And I wouldn't be upset if Axe Specialist got changed to a % damage increase instead. I think in general, design-wise, I don't like a lot of the perks because they just do what I would consider to be pretty small % damage increases. And I would prefer if they had more interesting or just flat damage numbers instead. Because it just seems like, the Barbarian is a class where you should be just trying to get a big damage number on them for their base damage, and then adding % modifiers to it. Having Barbarian having the only flat damage modifier from their perks is kind of weird to me. So maybe some reworking there would be pretty cool. And then a Felling Axe nerf. I think Felling Axe nerf is appropriate. It's a weird weapon. It's a hard weapon to use. But I think most people can agree that the follow-up attacks with it are too fast, and it's just too easy to kill a player in 2 hits. And then also a light armored player in a single hit too. People don't realize that it is pretty easy to dodge the attacks. Usually ducking and or strafing left or right, just like zigzagging is a pretty good way to dodge the Felling Axe hits. People kind of just want to trade hits with you usually, and then doing that is a big mistake because the Felling Axe will just chop you to pieces pretty quickly. As far as the other weapons, I don't know. I actually kind of like where the Barbarian weapons are right now. The dual, I think that the hatchets, the one-handed axes got a little bit of a stealth nerf in between, because I feel like just the numbers-wise, they seem like a lot lower than they used to be. I think that's fine. I think I would like... It's weird that the fighter has a 2-weapon fighting perk. You think that'd be more of a Barbarian thing, right? Well, forego having a shield and just having a weapon in both hands. You think of a Berserker Barbarian, right? You think of a Viking with 2 axes, 1 in each hand, right? That's what I would... it would be crazy. And I think it's a thing for World of Warcraft, right? With warriors where they can dual wield 2-handed weapons. That'd be pretty wild if a Barbarian could do that. That seems not like a good idea, though. But something along those lines. I would like abilities that maybe focus less on damage for the Barbarian and more on movement speed. Would be kind of cooler. Because they are inherently slow. That could cause balance problems, though, but we'll see. We'll get there when we get there. Up next, Cleric. I don't know why I put you in the A tier still. But up next, Cleric. How do we feel about changes to the Cleric right now? I kind of like them. I think they're doing a pretty good job of being a support character. I like the way that they support as well. It makes sense for a cleric, flavor-wise. I really have nothing I want to change. I will say that, again, the clerics have all these anti-undead abilities, which is fine and dandy for the normal dungeon. But for the Goblin Caves, there are not many undead enemies, and they feel like they're not supposed to be there. So... maybe just some tweaking of abilities, maybe. So here's the thing, right? In Dungeons and Dragons, right? When we talk about flavor, it's important when we talk about this game that we talk about things being aesthetically similar to Dungeons and Dragons, because that is the design goal of the game, right? Clerics do have a lot of undead spells, turn undead. Well, they're not really spells, I guess. They're more of abilities, but Turning undead, things like that. It makes sense for a cleric. Clerics also have access to spells that are just anti-evil, right? Like, you know, things of that nature. And I think maybe just giving a cleric like an anti-evil spell, like protection against evil, right? Would maybe be a better option for them. So that, and I guess it's maybe mean to call goblins evil. I don't know. They seem like little rat bastards to me in this game. So that I think is maybe a better design direction for the clerics, to be less undead focused and more just AI focused in that regard when it comes to their spells. I don't know, just an idea. Just an idea, nothing too wild there. But I honestly like where the cleric is. I did put them S rank in the tier list for the 3v3s, and I don't. A character can be the best character in the game. They don't have to be nerfed. The cleric does have the downside, like a literal, kind of like an invisible nerf of being kind of boring to play, right? Support characters inherently are kind of boring because they're not the ones doing the actual killing. They're just helping the characters on your team do the killing. So I think it's okay to make them the best character in the game because of that, basically. And if you disagree with that, that's perfectly fine. But I don't want to nerf the cleric. I kind of like where they are right now. Expanding spell list is always cool. They did just get the Sanctuary spell, which is a little bit underpowered if you ask me. It's just not worth the knowledge cost to do that. But I like it. I like the idea of expanding the spell books more. I would like, if I were to get a spell in for clerics, I would like an actual consistent, like, just range damage dealer. I know that they have like a skill that they can use that does range damage. I think, like, what is this? Judgment? But like an actual spell that's like a targeted blast, like a radiant burst or whatever. Some sort of holy spell to deal damage to just anyone would be kind of cool. Not like specifically undead targets. Anyway, so there's that. Fighter. What do we do about the fighter? I think we need to make the fighter better in melee combat. I think when it comes to Dungeons and Dragons, fighters, if you like, arguably better than rangers at ranged combat in actual Dungeons and Dragons. And I personally have always hated that. I have not liked the fact that fighters are a better ranged combat character than I don't like that fighters are a better ranged combat character than rangers. I don't like it. So I would prefer this game to focus more on the fighters being melee combatants. And the question is that how do we make fighters capable of fighting barbarians on equal footing? Because that's what we need, right? We need these two to be pretty closely balanced in melee combat. How do we do that? I don't know. It's hard to say. Maybe I think a big thing would be less movement speed penalty on heavy armored characters. It's just weird to me that, like, the meta for this game is very oftentimes stripping down to be naked so you can move faster. That I don't like. When you think about Dungeons and Dragons, right? Sometimes really heavy armor will lower your character's movement speed a little bit, but usually there's like workarounds, like you can I don't know, make it out of like a lighter material so you don't get that move speed penalty and things like that. I think that just a general sweeping change, I would like generally less movement speed penalties on armor, because movement speed is so important in this game. Footsies in combat is extremely important, and just being a tiny bit slower is a huge deal. So I would like fighters to be able to move a little bit faster than they currently do in heavy armor. And that would be a big thing. I know they have a perk that does that, but even with that perk, they're so damn slow. And I would like them to move a little bit faster. Still. And just in general, it's so weird that wizards like take off their clothing to move faster, because they already are so frail. It doesn't matter if they get hit. I don't like that as a design. It's like a game design. I don't like that, right? In Dungeons and Dragons, you don't see your wizard stripped down naked in every fight so they can move a little bit faster. That would just be weird. And it's weird that like a robe moves you or slows your movement down, right? Like I don't know. Those are my thoughts about that, at least there. That's what I would like for fighter, is better movement speed so they can tango better with barbarians, and more focus. Maybe some more perks that actually make their damage better. Combo attack kind of sucks right now, because again, barbarians are killing you before you can get your third hit out. So I don't know. I don't know about fighters right now. That I would like some more changes in that regard. Maybe it's like a sword and board perk where it's like if you're holding a sword and a shield, you get 10% increased damage, or a flat 10 damage if you're using a sword. Something like that. I don't know. Would be cool. Anyway, moving on to Ranger. I have nothing that I want changed about Ranger. I really, like I said before, I put Ranger pretty high tier, maybe higher than most people do. And I like where they're at balance-wise right now. I think they're in a pretty good spot. Yeah, honestly, no. Yeah, I got nothing to change about them, I think. I like where they are. Maybe the damage fall-off is a little too high. But I don't know. I like where they are. I will say the same thing I was saying before about fighters. The movement speed penalties on, like, Ranger gear is just weird. And sorry about that. I bumped my mic again. I'm a big hand talker, so you can't see me right now, but I'm waving my arms around like a maniac, and I keep bumping the mic. But yeah, Ranger, I would not hate for their gear to stop having negative move speed reductions on them. Like, it's just weird. And there's gear that gives you agility usually. It gives you agility and then it lowers your movement speed. And it's just like, why are you doing this to me? Just let me be me, mom. But anyway, I like where Rangers are though. I think they don't need much changes. They're in a pretty good spot right now, if you ask me. I will say though that I don't love the crossbow perk, right? I feel like it's just weird, and I think I would just prefer Rangers to be focused in this game. I know in Dungeons and Dragons, Rangers can use whatever range weapon they want, basically. But I think in this game, it makes more sense to have Rangers have a bow and arrow focus, and fighters, if they want to use range combat, to have more of a crossbow focus. You know what I would say? Maybe fighters should have a crossbow perk. Maybe fighters should have like a crossbow focus perk, and then Rangers can have less of those. Maybe. I don't know. I like that as a thing, though. Thief. What the fuck do we do with Thief right now? The first problem with Thieves is that they are incredibly squishy. And I'm not saying that you need to make them less squishy. They can be squishy, that's fine. But they need to have more damage. Thief needs to be a character where if they sneak up on you, they kill you. That should be the whole point of them, right? They should, like, if I sneak up on a barbarian as a thief, I want to stab them 4 times, and I want them to be dead after that, right? And the question is, how do we do this? Lots of ways to do this, right? Increasing the backstab damage modifier is my first thing. A 30% increase to backstab damage is not that big of a deal, right? It's not nothing, but it's not that big of a deal, and I would like it to be more. If you're getting hit in the back by a rogue, I want it to fucking hurt. I don't know what the number is. I don't know what the magic number is for it, but it would, I imagine, be a lot more satisfying for rogue players to actually sneak up on someone and actually stab them in the back and feel like it actually matters that you're hitting them from behind rather than the front, right? My first inclination is maybe like 100% increased damage. Basically, right, here's like the thing. It's hard to hit a character in the back of the head. And I haven't tested it, but I assume back headshots with the backstab multiplier is even more damage. But I think the idea here is that we want backstab to be more worthwhile than aiming for the head, right, as a rogue. So I would say maybe like the sweet spot here is 100% increased multiplier to backstab damage, but does not apply to headshots, right? So headshots are still double damage, but then an enemy's back becomes their head, basically. That's how I want rogues to feel. That's how we all want rogues to play, basically, right? So there's that. That's the first thing. The second thing, I was talking before about barbarians getting flat damages on axe hits. There's like a lot of rogue perks. I didn't mean not a lot, but there's like a decent number of rogue perks that like add % damage. And it's important to note that the rogue does very small damage per hit, right? If a dagger does 20% or does 20 damage, right? If a dagger does 20 damage as a rogue, not taking into account the fact that rogues have such low strength that their damage multiplier is in the negative, so they actually lose damage, right? Not even taking that into account, right? A dagger does like roughly 20 damage per hit. You get the dagger perk to add 5% increase to that damage. You are now adding 1 extra damage on that number per hit. That's nothing. That is not a perk. That is so bad. It is so fucking bad. Why not a flat 5? Why not a +5 damage per dagger hit? So it actually makes sense because the rogue hits a lot. I don't know. That's what I would like. I would like more incentive for backstabbing. More like a flat damage dagger perk instead. And maybe this is gonna be too much. I would like the rogues to have access to the survival bow. Survival bow sucks. Rangers don't like it. Fighters don't like it. Nobody likes the survival bow. I don't see why the Rangers can't have it. I think it makes sense. In Dungeons and Dragons, Rangers use bows all the damn time, right? It's not that uncommon. Maybe you want to make it so that way you can't backstab with the bow. I understand that maybe, right? You want to make it so that way that doesn't work. But I have no problem. Even if you can apply poison, and even if you can apply rupture onto the rogue, I don't have an issue with the rogue having access to the survival bow. Maybe that's just me. Maybe that's too much. But the rogues are really bad right now, and I would like them to be better. Because they're a cool character, and they're fun to play. I played them a lot this playtest, and they're really cool and satisfying when you do the thing you're supposed to do. But it's just so easy for you to sneak up on a barbarian, stab him in the back twice. They turn around, they just hit you in the head with a felling axe, you're dead. And you go to spectate them, and you did like a quarter of their health and damage. And you're like, oh, so I was never going to win this fight. It's just, you know, it's bad. It's that in a perfect, and I think we can all agree, in a perfect world, rogues win if they sneak attack you. That should be how they operate, I feel like, but whatever. What are you gonna do? Lastly, we have the wizard here. I don't know what you changed with the wizard, man. Again, this is like one of my least played characters. Oh, did I do the cleric? Yeah, I did do the cleric actually. Wizard's one of my least played characters this playtest. More than the cleric, but not by much. What do you do with the wizard? One thing that I would really like, and that's something I've talked about with my friends before. I would like the wizard to have more utility, and not utility as in like support. Utility as in like just utility, like weird random stuff that wizards can do. If you've ever played Dungeons and Dragons, wizards have like the biggest spell list basically, and they have a lot of crazy shit they can do. For example, you have the knock spell, which I don't even know if that exists actually in 5th edition. Let me look it up actually. I'm curious now. Knock. Is it a spell? What level spell is this? It is a level 2 transmutation spell. Okay, interesting. But anyway, so knock is a fun little spell that wizards have where they can just unlock an object. They see like a chest or a door or something and they just go boop and it's unlocked, right? That's cool. That's neat. I like that. I like that wizards can do that. And I think that it makes sense that rogues aren't the only character in the game that can unlock things. I don't have an issue with wizards having support spells, but I do hope that once the bard gets added to the game, the wizard goes a little bit less towards supporting and a little bit more towards either damage or utility. That's what I want out of the wizards. And first thing right off the bat, knock just makes sense as a spell for wizards to have. In this game especially, more so than like anywhere before I've ever seen in a video game. It just makes sense for wizards to have the ability to unlock things. So rogues aren't the only one that can do it. Besides that, I mean, we can just go down the list of really cool spells that wizards can have. They already have Fireball, which is really cool. They already have like Lightning Bolt stuff, which is pretty cool. I would like maybe some touch spells, some close quarter spells. So if someone gets close to a wizard, they can like do like a Shocking Grasp and just do that instead. That could be kind of cool. Yeah, but yeah, some more melee focused spells would be neat for wizards. Like a teleport would be the dream. The wizards could teleport in this game. That'd be so cool. But I don't know if that'll ever be a thing. It might be a little hard to program and stuff like that, but that would be really neat. I don't know, I'm sure there's other stuff you can think of too for wizards to do, but yeah, that's it. That's my video. Hopefully you enjoyed. Hopefully I will see you for whatever next video I make. Goodbye.